Doesn't matter. It's just kind of fun that way. All right, here we are live on Channel 9, YouTube, and Facebook, allegedly. My name's Chad Bishop, and we are happy you've tuned in. If you're watching the show at 7 o'clock on Wednesday, October 2nd, you're tuning in live, which means you have an opportunity to see things as they're happening, and you can also tweet at hashtag Muscatine Viewpoint. If you have Twitter, if you don't, get an account real quick. You can actually see that white space there? That white space could be filled with your clever anecdotal questions and or comments. So even if you just want to say hi, it's fun to have an opportunity for the public to be able to engage with our guests here today. Now, Muscatine Viewpoint is a show that brings viewpoints, different views to life, local topics, local celebrities, if you will, leaders. This is your show, not mine. So if you'd like to be on the show in the future, if you have a viewpoint, you're welcome to be on the show. This particular season, we're going to focus mostly on the candidates, both school board and the city officials, giving you an opportunity to have an informed vote, if you will, by getting to know the candidates, and then also we'll get a chance to see what their viewpoints are. They'll probably differ from time to time. That's the nature of why we're here, is to expand our views and our knowledge of Muscatine. So, without further ado, our two guests to start with this first episode are at-large candidates for City Council. We have two people here, Dewayne Hopkins and Daniel Salazar. So let's welcome them to the show.
Hi, Chad.
Hello, Daniel.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show. And we would like to kind of get to know you both briefly. And then I've got some topics and some questions. And it'll be my treat to see how we can kind of shed some light on your views and your opportunities running for City Council this year. To start with.
Before you get started,
Okay.
I'd like to say what a pleasure it is for a young person like Daniel to be running for a seat on the City Council. I think that's absolutely marvelous. I wish more people thought like you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, good. We're starting off with that, with a nice, polite gesture, and that's a good point. I think it'll become evident the more we get to know Daniel that that's exactly the truth.
Sure.
Well, let's get to know you first a little bit. Your name's Dewayne Hopkins. I know who you are, but tell us a little bit about your current situation, and I guess just a blanket statement of why you're running this year.
I'm Dewayne Hopkins again. I'm 71 years old. I've lived in Muscatine my entire life. I live at 5602 Reynolds Avenue in Muscatine. That's down by the airport, for those of you that don't know. That's Ward 4 within the city. I'm running because I served the city back in 2012 through 2016. Back then, Randy Hill and Steve Boca negotiated with the Iowa DOT to take command of Highway 92/61 as it came through Muscatine. Those two guys came away from that meeting with much more money than I think anybody anticipated. Well, they started what's called the Corridor Project. Phase 1 of the Corridor Project is about 90% done now, and Phase 2 will start too. My point is, to make a long story short, I was involved in the beginning. I took a little bit of a hiatus. I would like to get back involved and grab Phase 2 by the horns and go with it. Then there's the renovation of the Riverfront Park. I'd like to be a part of that. Then there's Peace Park, which is sort of a new initiative. I'm already, in a roundabout way, a part of that, but I want to see that through as well. So those are just a couple of the reasons why I've decided to get back into the hunt.
Great. Okay. Well, that's a good opening statement. Same question to you. Tell us a little bit about your current situation and why you're running this year for at-large.
Hi, so my name is Daniel Salazar, and I'm running for at-large there for City Council. Currently, right now, I am a student here at MCC, studying political science, and I'm also a server downtown at a Mexican restaurant there. In my life, though not very long yet, I've been involved in a lot of things such as speech and debate and Model United Nations. And as a citizen, one of the most important parts about City Council is that it's supposed to be a representation of the whole city, and my goal is to try to do that. hopefully people, whether I win or not, people can see that it takes ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And I guess that's kind of my goal here, is to kind of get other people, whether young or old, to see that they can step up and they can do it as well. And maybe I can do a few good things along the way.
Great. Well put. Well, thanks for being on the show, guys. And I think we're going to delve into some specifics of what you just mentioned there. I've got some questions to get us started with and some topics that the folks at home would like to know your viewpoints on, because there's a lot of things that go on in Muscatine and people have opinions about. And so it's always great to kind of see what future leaders of Muscatine think about these things. But to start with, Dewayne, just right off the bat here, why didn't you run for mayor last year? I believe you didn't run for mayor.
2 years ago.
2 years ago, okay. So guys, the question is, you chose to run for city council this year, but the mayor position was an option. How did you decide between mayor or city council?
I just don't want to be the mayor.
Okay.
I would rather be a council person, and the biggest reason why is the mayor can't vote on anything. The mayor runs the council meetings, and that's about the extent of his or her responsibility on that given night. As a council person, I can vote on issues as they come down the line, which is important to me. I want to have a vote, a say-so in what's happening within the city limits.
Well put. In the way I understand our current city structure, the power, if you will, is in the city council vote. The leadership, it could be from the mayor's perspective, but the true power seems to be the vote. Now, the question to you, Daniel, hopefully, I'm sure you understand the circumstance, but the mayor, well, he just explained it, but do you think that the mayor should have a vote or more authority, or is the current way it's laid out with the city council having the vote and the mayor being kind of like the tiebreaker, if you will, but being more of a spokeshead, be more appropriate?
Well, here's the thing. I think there is a reason we have a mayor, and there is a reason we have the rules we have in place now. I'm not saying that the mayor needs to go ahead and take all this power and now she can do whatever she wants. Absolutely not. But it's important to understand that if the mayor is going to be a representation of our community, we need to get behind that. We need to make sure she's able to communicate not just with the people in the city, but with the people who work with her, with the people who work with the council, to make sure everyone's kind of on the same page. And I would not be opposed to maybe having her possibly be someone who has a tie-breaking vote. But I'm absolutely not advocating that, she has completely no power.
So within that current situation, there was a little bit of a dramatic opportunity for Muscatine residents to enjoy or experience a court opportunity. And there was a lawsuit. One was both against the city of Muscatine. And now that we're on the other side of that, we understand that the current mayor won a $75,000 lawsuit, and the city administrator won a $50,000 lawsuit. Do you have any thoughts on who won? If anybody.
Are you posing that question to
yeah.
me? Nobody wins in any lawsuit. It's irrelevant who got what or when they got it or whatever. What's relevant is what they do with it. Now, I'm sure both parties have legal fees to adhere to, and if there's anything left over, what are they going to do with the funds? Personally, I don't think, and I understand why he did it, but I don't think that the city administrator should have sued the city, and that was part of the lawsuit.
Okay.
The city administrator had to sue the city to get to the mayor. Again, that's all legal stuff, and I don't know that much about it. It's just too bad that the thing had to come to that. I don't know. It's just too bad.
So the current city council was frustrated with the mayor at the time and wanted.
The council at that time.
Yeah.
Was frustrated with the mayor. This is a different council.
Yeah, for sure. Yep, that's why I'm prefacing that for Daniel, because I just kind of want to know your take on it. I know you're a little young, but obviously it was going on, and I'm sure it was probably part of what motivated you to become involved in the community.
Absolutely. So, honestly, though, you said we're going to have different views. This is something we can't agree on. Nobody won in that situation. But I think it's important that we keep trudging forward. One of the reasons why I wanted to run is because I wanted to make sure we get back on track. I dislike when I go to different places here in Iowa and they say, oh, you're from Muscatine, that's not okay. We don't want to be seen as a laughingstock. We don't want to be seen as unprofessional. We have so many opportunities here and that we already are doing and things that we can do. And, you know, to have something like this happen, it is embarrassing. And I think you can agree to that.
Yes.
I think there is definitely a better way to handle that situation with communication, with talking to people. And that wasn't necessarily followed. But I am glad that we have, like you said, we have the new council. And I feel like they're taking appropriate action to move things forward and to continue.
Now, I couldn't help but to notice that the current council candidacy, there are 4 incumbents. There's 5. Mayor Broderson, Fitzgerald for 1st Ward, Tom Spread for 3rd Ward, Harvey for 5th Ward, and Saucedo for at-large. Now, 4 to 5 of those all have the same thing in common. They're not running again. Now, I don't think that's a good thing, and I have my theories as to why they're not running again. But and if you talk to them individually, they might. Maybe it was just a coincidence, you know, that they stopped running. But do you guys have any thoughts on the incumbents' decisions not to run, and or any positive insights into some of the people? Well, you 4 are running, but. Is that a coincidence? I guess that's my question. You know, like, is that a coincidence, or is that kind of the backlash of that turmoil? Because the council members were once called the Good Old Boys Club for one thing, but I don't think they were feeling appreciated. You know,
Now, just out of curiosity, where did you get that term?
Good Old Boys Club.
Yeah.
From
Did you hear that from someone?
yeah, through the Facebook and the lawsuit proceedings.
And in your opinion, what's the definition of the Good Old Boys Club?
I do feel slightly guilty for a couple things. One, that I'm white, and one, that I'm a male. And so I wanted to ask you guys about that too, because I really do feel kind of odd about it now. And I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. I think things are going in the right direction for America. But I lost track of my question. It's a loaded term, and I'm sorry that it even got put out there.
Without question. Why is anyone even using a term such as that? And where did it originate from?
I'm not
Maybe
sure.
years and years ago,
Yeah.
there was such a thing as a Good Old Boys Club here in Muscatine. Maybe it was necessary at the time. But today, or at least I think in half of my lifetime, which would be 35 years, I don't think, number one, there is a Good Old Boys Club, and number two, if there was, they sure keep it a secret.
And what I'm happy to celebrate is in 2020, women's suffraging is celebrating the 100th year anniversary, and we're going to be doing a lot to acknowledge that. So to your point, things have definitely changed.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
I mean, 100 years ago, women couldn't even vote, and now that's obviously
Sure. Sure.
changed dramatically. And so that's a very slanderous, maybe I don't know the word, but that's a term. There's a couple terms in society, that we probably shouldn't use anymore. They're
That being one of
insulting.
them.
What are your thoughts on the incumbent's choice, and or your thoughts on how that might have inspired you to run?
Well, is it a coincidence? I don't know. You have to ask them. I know at least one. I know their reasoning, and it's not necessarily because they all got together. He has different opportunities ahead of him. For the other people, I can't say. Now, responding to the idea of there being a Good Old Boys Club, I like to say there's not. But the fact of the matter is that if people think there is, then that's an issue, and we have to address it. If there is one, let's take it down. If there isn't, all right, we need to keep stressing, and we need to show the people that there is not, and show them examples of how that's not true. We're working together, and we can continue forward.
Right, exactly.
Do you two think that the council is bipartisan? I mean, I never thought of the council members as Democrat or Republican.
It's not
But
supposed to be.
okay, elaborate.
I think the current council is partisan.
Yeah.
You asked the question, I just answered.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that? I'm not sure if you affiliate yourself with a particular party, and I have my thought on why I'm not even going to ask you, because this is like, I agree that that's usually, it never used to be a thing,
Right.
It's just about city issues.
Well, to answer that, I think the best answer is yes and no. Because deep down inside, whether it be because of how we grew up or what we learned in school, individually we all have whether we want to be more leaning to the left or more leaning to the right. The problem we run into is when we're not able to control it. when we decide that, hey, I think, my people over here are going to want this, so that's what I'm going to do. At times, could it be an issue? Maybe. But it's really hard to see where the line is between they're going to vote with their party or they're going to vote because they think that's actually right. They think that's the best thing to do. And sometimes what one person thinks the best thing to do is, it's not the best thing for someone else. And that's where we run into this idea like, oh, okay, well, he must be, voting for his party. When in reality, it might not necessarily be to the extent that they might think.
Well, Daniel, if I might capitalize on that, the role of a city councilman, whether you're a ward alderman or you're an alderman at large, is to represent your community. Again, if you're in a ward, you represent the ward people. It isn't about, well, my party thinks we ought to do this, so I'm voting for this, or my party thinks we ought to do that. You're on the council to represent each and every one of your constituents, even those that don't vote. That's your primary job. You listen, you engage, and you vote in accordance with what your constituents want.
Jeremy, put up the graphic for the topic. I'm going to throw some topics out. And the topics I've chosen are ones that I've seen the council vote on, and it's going to come up again. And so this is kind of an opportunity to kind of shed some light on
Sure.
what you would have done had you been in council when they had that. So the first topic is fireworks. A couple years ago, Iowa allowed fireworks in Iowa. And I believe that's a good thing for a variety of reasons, namely for the tax revenue, the revenue that it generates. But there's a lot of issues. Some dogs have PTSD, I've learned about. And this is a funny situation, but these are some of the complaints. And fireworks are being blown off in the city, and people are up past 10:30. Somebody lost some of their digits. But on the other hand, MCSA happily received $15,000 from their fireworks revenue generating opportunities. And I believe it helps lower taxes in our community. So there's pros and cons, but it went up for vote, and the city allowed it July 3rd and 4th. So the fireworks stands are there all year, for like 3 weeks,
Well,
but you have
at least
that.
a month out, yeah.
You have this little two 5-hour window of opportunity. If you start at 9 p.m. like I did, and you stop at 10, is it? You have to have a pretty tight fireworks display.
Right.
And I obeyed by it. But anyway, it's almost like saying no fireworks in town. It's pretty restrictive.
Sure.
But it's the city's right at the moment. The state opened it up, and now the city had to choose. Let's start with you. What would you have done, or what are your thoughts on the firework ordinance as it sits, and what you would think it should be compared to what it is now?
Honestly, I agree with what they did. If anything, I'd suggest maybe they make certain spaces where they can use that specifically. Because what we have to understand is the idea behind 4th of July is celebrating our independence. Celebrating us being the United States of America is not necessarily how loud we can be. Though, I'll be honest, I like fireworks. In that case, I go out to a piece of land my grandfather owns out in the country, and we do it then. What we have to take into consideration, and this kind of ties in with one of the things I want to focus on, which is health, is people's mental health. Yes, we talk, of course, the dogs, but the soldiers, the men and women who come home, and they have to deal with that. And it brings back bad memories that they don't want to remember. And that's something we need to take into consideration, because they are a part of our city, our community.
Well, I agree with Daniel. In fact, that's a good idea. Assigning real estate or using real estate to display your fireworks and so forth. But the issue is, I think, much broader than that. Enter the public safety building and the Muscatine Police Department. Should we beef up our police department for those 2 days, the 3rd and the 4th of July? To curtail any of that after 10 p.m. Display of fireworks? It's a question that I think needs to be answered.
Yeah, it seems, people go a little bit over here and there.
Yeah,
It's kind of one of those laws. It's kind of like you're dangling a carrot, because it's kind of hard to stop right at 10, and that seems like a burden to the police. So that might be another thing. Like, well, maybe it's a bad idea because X amount of dollars that you have to have in police force, and the fire department gets a few more calls than what they're used to. But yeah, I think having separate spaces. I live. I'm not going to disclose my exact address, but the cul-de-sac I live in, I do feel a little weird that I'm allowed to light these fireworks. The loudness is because it has to have that loudness to disseminate the sparkling effect, but I find it odd that I'm allowed to do it. It feels like, I feel like I'm an American. It feels free and great, but I would gladly go to maybe 10 different designated areas. And if I spend $200 on some fireworks and you spend $200 and we all go to the same spot, you offered us some land with your family, that would be kind of cool because you would actually enjoy each other's, outcropping.
But what if you lived at, let's say 500 West 4th Street, and I don't know who lives in that.
Yeah.
In that particular home, but there's a lot of homes. In front of, next to, behind, and then, could you display the same fireworks that you do now at your current home if you lived at 500 West 4th?
People are doing it according to the social media reports.
And I think the way to move forward with this is explaining more to people so they understand why you're doing it. We're not doing it because we hate people. We're not doing it because we hate America. We're doing it because we're thinking of our citizens.
Sure.
We're thinking of the people here.
And, everybody should act exactly how you want them to. Everybody should, no, we all think differently. So I do like the fact that they allow it, but during a certain amount of time, because I'll just put some earplugs in, quite frankly. I've dealt with way worse things. But it could be a nuisance, but you're going to get calls, pro and con in all these debates. And you worded it well because you kind of have to think about the broad picture of who you're representing and what your constituents would want. And it has to kind of be the majority a lot of times because this one in particular, there isn't a majority, an obvious right answer.
But different rules, because there's different dwellings.
And so did I hear both you say that they shouldn't be banned altogether in Muscatine? Because that is an option.
I don't think so. I agree with Daniel. It's a sign of a celebration of our independence.
Okay, there's another topic. I'm not as familiar with it, but I had interviewed a current council member, and he'd mentioned this would be a good one to talk about. But the pit bull ordinance isn't going away. It's still there. I thought we kind of had passed it, but it's still alive and brewing. So, Dewayne, I'll start with you because you probably know a little bit more about it. But what are your
Well,
thoughts on the ordinance and
Yeah, the
controlling
ordinance
people's
was
rights
passed
to own?
when I was the mayor. And Councilman Salcedo brought it up at the last council meeting that he wants to review that code and perhaps change it. Pit bulls by nature, some are, some aren't. Mean dogs. But labs by nature, some are mean, some are not. Collies, some are mean, some are not. Why be specific to pit bulls? So to answer your question, I would vote to change the code.
Okay. And what can you summarize the code as it sits?
No.
Okay,
Sorry.
as I said, I didn't do my diligence on that particular issue, but what are your thoughts on the city kind of controlling ownership of a certain breed of dog?
Right. Well, here's the thing. I don't have fish, but I do understand the importance that it has with the person and the relationship that it has. So in terms of this rule that's in place, I would love to review it, and if they're scared that they're gonna attack people and that the owners aren't gonna be responsible, all right, let's tackle that. Let's see if we can maybe make some type of program or work with a program already in place to have lessons for people or kind of making sure people understand the duties of doing that. It is a bit strange that we have that ban in place, and for a lot of people, it's very hard. People who had a pit bull before it was installed, they had to figure out what to do with their best friend.
That's right.
Another topic that never goes away, and I still kind of prolific in town, is the issue of parking, and specifically downtown parking. Recently, we went from one-way streets to two-way streets. I'm old enough to have done something called cruising the ones in Muscatine. And it basically involved, well, before, phones and whatnot, cell phones, people would cruise the ones one way and then cruise down, and we'd wave at each other and then use our voices to communicate to each other and tell each other where we were going to meet in real life. They recently changed them to two-way streets, which does affect the parking. What I noticed specifically is when I'm driving down 2nd Street, I see a bunch of cool spots on the other side of the street, and I'm not sure if I can do a U-turn, but I think it makes the parking a little different. But more importantly, 2-hour or 3-hour, I believe the city council has an opportunity to weigh in on those kind of decisions, or they have in the past. What would you do to address the people that live in downtown Muscatine, the owners, and then the people that visit. Like, is there a solution that you had in mind, or a thought on parking in downtown Muscatine, and or the one-way streets and how that might be good and bad for Muscatine? I'll start with you on that one.
Cool. So, in terms of parking, if we have visitors, they can't always go to the riverfront. And the good thing about that is that's riverfront. They'll take time to walk there, walk across the street, things like that. In terms of owners, people who own businesses, I really think it should be much easier for them and not as expensive for them to get their own parking spot, because they decided to stay here in Muscatine and make their own businesses, spend their time here caring for us people, and why are we making it so hard for them? And now they gotta, every 4 hours they gotta go outside and move their car. In terms of people who just happen to work there, it's a tricky predicament, because yes, in one way we do have to make money as a city, but if there's any way, like having a spot like at the riverfront or something like that designated for those workers, that would be great. And I can't promise you, that's going to happen, but we're not terribly off on what we're supposed to be doing.
And we'd like to remind everybody, if you have a thought on any of our topics, hashtag Muscatine Viewpoint, we'll put your comment and or question up here, because you might have some opportunities to add a discussion in a way that we're not aware of. This is your channel, not ours. I enjoy the fact that you mentioned people could park downtown at the riverfront, because we used to be a Blue Zones community, and we still kind of are, but it's not a bad idea to walk more, especially how little we walk now that we have phones and email. I text my son, and he lives in the same house. Sometimes, but you know what I mean. Like, there's less and less of a reason to leave the house and get in that built-in exercise. So I think being proactive and promoting walking further isn't a horrible thing to kind of change that mindset. But parking rules, and a lot of times people choose where they're going to shop based on that. And Amazon.com is a lot less of a walk and or a lot less hassle parking, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But it's the way things are changing. What do you think about parking in Muscatine? Downtown.
Well, parking or the two-way streets? Or?
A little bit of, I think they're affecting each other, but.
Because of my age, I was there when they were one-ways. And I did the same thing, and people used to drive from the Dog and Suds, the one-ways downtown to the Cherry Top, turn around and reverse that motion. I really like the two-way streets in downtown Muscatine. I don't have a problem with the parking. Only the store owner parks either right in front of his store or in a parking spot either side adjacent to. That, I have a problem with that. As far as the residents downtown, there's off-street parking. You just have to look for it.
Yeah. So if you're looking for a place to live and you want great parking, downtown maybe isn't your best bet. If you want to be approximate to all the great shops and restaurants and opportunities that downtown offers, then there's a trade-off. Just
right.
like
now, you were referring to back when they were one-way streets and so forth. Well, back then they didn't have cell phones and social media, and we have that today. And that's, those items have taken the place of lots of other things, and I think the one-way traffic and the communication, the guy going the other direction is part of that.
Yeah, I agree. Yep. So, that's not something that's going away, but what I do notice is we're putting a lot of time and effort into the downtown. And I got a call the other day from the mall, and they asked us, we're kind of treating the mall as what I call urban backwaters. The mall could be a great place for an event center. It's a great place for mall walking. I mean, it's a great indoor.
Used to be.
Yeah. What did it change? But you know what I mean? When you put all of your efforts into the downtown, then the south end and the mall might suffer a little bit. I know we can't please everybody all the time, but what do you guys think about, and I know Amazon and the mall, I'm not saying the mall should be revived as a mall. That ship has sailed. Things have changed. But what do you guys think about our efforts focusing on the downtown and how that might affect the mall, that part of town, like where Long John Silver's is no longer at and whatnot. So Muscatine Mall.
Okay. There's always been an adage that the South End businessman took offense to the mall businessman who took offense to the downtown businessman. I think you're always gonna have that kind of a small war going on with regards to advertising and so on and so forth. Is the downtown better off now than it was 4 years ago?
Definitely.
You think it is?
Well, yeah, well, in as much as it could be giving all of the
I mean,
competition.
Tattoo shops and,
Yeah,
and things like
there
that.
is a couple of noteworthy places down there. The rent is very affordable.
Well, it's not, the downtown is not near as successful as it was 20, 25, and 30 years
Yeah,
ago.
that's the more safe
Those
statement.
days are probably gone. But couldn't the downtown be a little bit more like, shall we say, Galena?
Or LaSalle, Galena destinations. Yeah.
And couldn't the mall be revised just a little bit, maybe move some of the, and a couple of the indoor stores to have an outdoor exit and entrance?
Yeah, front facing.
And the south end, we're about to engage in phase 2
Yeah.
of the corridor
So
project.
they're hooked up.
And I've seen some of the plans from Carver Corner on down to the Dick Drake Way. And there's some neat things that are going to happen down there, and hopefully that will encourage more retail.
So are you advocating that the city has a say in what businesses are allowed downtown?
Oh, no.
Okay, because I don't even know if that's an option, but
No, I just mentioned that there's a few tattoo
you're just,
parlors.
yeah, you're almost like as a citizen kind of
Yeah.
looking at.
Yes.
What do you think about, I mean, the mall used to be kind of a virtual chat room of sorts. So as you mentioned, I'm not advocating or suggesting it's going to be back there, but there is a little push in a certain direction. What are your thoughts on this topic?
So obviously times are changing. We're not in a time where we necessarily have a mall. Like you said, we have Amazon. But on that same note, Amazon does not have flowers on the avenue. Amazon does not have, some of the things that we have downtown that are locally owned. And it's important that we invest in that, invest in them, and at the same time we're investing in our economy. And so after that, in terms of the mall and what we can use that for, there's a variety of reasons, and I don't have the right answer. It can be used as a place to call people to bring more entertainment into town. So we have something more to do than the bowling alley and Walmart, and that's it. So to speak. So there's a lot of things we can do in terms of using it for something for performances and things like that. The bold idea, which will not be done now, but the bold idea is, why not make a new performing arts center that's efficient and that's built green. And that way, not only will we have a place for our performers here, but when the Chinese come every Chinese New Year and play for free, they have a better place to play at.
Yeah, Performing Arts Center, especially with the Central Middle School kind of disbanding and that Performing Arts Center kind of hanging by a thread, is something the community will need more than ever, and maybe the mall, because the infrastructure is there. It reminds me of the River Center as far as that goes. The old JCPenney's, I think, would be a great place for that. But yeah, that's a great idea for a lot of opportunities as far as that goes. Now, I don't want to go round and round, but I do want to talk about roundabouts. I didn't put that topic on there, but man, roundabouts are what this town, it can go off on any tangent that you want. And I think it's because of Facebook. I mean, Facebook, because maybe they always used to, but now people have opinions about things. And if you've got some time, you can go to the chat room and you can read about roundabouts till you're exhausted. We have our own roundabout. I happen to like it, but there's a new proposed one, and I think it's actually happening for sure now. It's where H&I is. They're demolishing some buildings, and to make this roundabout happen at Mulberry and 2nd Street. And there was a proposed one at Hauser to take off the traffic from the school. And that's a smaller one, and that's probably the first one that got a lot of pushback from the people that didn't want it. But maybe the people that did want it were guilty of not speaking up. I don't know how you can quantify that as a future legislator. But what are your thoughts on roundabouts? And I believe I'll start with you on this case in Muscatine.
So roundabouts are new, and anything new can be scary. So while people at the level where they make these decisions might understand and know how much safer they might be and how more efficient it might be, regular people might not know that. So the important thing to do is make sure they do, is reach out and explain to them exactly how it's going to help and exactly what it means for them. Because a lot of people, they just hear that it's going to happen and they got no word and they have no input. Sure, we put things on the website. It's great. but not everybody has 5-10 minutes to look on there and see exactly where it is. We need to make sure we're more transparent and we make this information easier for people to access.
The roundabout on Hauser was shot down because it's just too small. The intersection there isn't large enough for a good size roundabout. Now, the roundabout that you're talking about on Cedar Street, you like it, you use it. I, as a bus driver, use it 3 times a day, 5 days a week. I know what it was like trying to get off Logan Street onto Cedar Street, either to get to the high school or get to Central Middle School. It was a disaster. So the Cedar Street roundabout is working good. The only thing about that I don't like is drivers sometimes ignore people at the next intersection. And instead of using the zipper method, are you familiar with the zipper method?
I believe so, just
Yeah, every other car and so forth. They just headlight to bumpers, headlight to back bumpers, headlight to back bumpers. And if you're driving a bus, they don't let you in. But anyway, that roundabout is much safer, much more efficient. Now you're talking about a roundabout at the intersection of Mulberry and 2nd Street. You refer to it as Hans roundabout. I think there's enough room there that they will do something good with that.
Yeah.
The yet to be determined roundabout or whatever is at Carver Corner.
Yeah, and that's a good segue for the Peace Park. Oddly enough, the Peace Park is creating some battles and some wars in the community. So already it's off to a bad start. Actually, that was just one proposal called a Peace Park. The other proposal doesn't have a catchy name. But like you mentioned, that was going to be Carver Corner, Roy Carver had a pump company there. And so it's a great way to honor the legacy of that company. But that seemed like kind of an awkward intersection. I mean, it really is at the moment. And a roundabout seemed like a nice fix.
Leftover. It's a leftover intersection. The real estate around there is left over.
Yep. So I'm not sure where that roundabout sits. I know that's kind of part of the phase 2 because that'd be the capstone of the south end.
Right.
But this Peace Park, I didn't research it a whole lot. I'm thinking about having Mr. Clark and a few people that are representing the Peace Park idea. But it seems like the city got in a little bit of trouble for not being transparent enough or having enough public meetings that I believe Ms. Meeker was one of the more outspoken persons about that. Making sure that everybody had a chance to propose and suggest their development. And if I'm not misunderstood, the city did award a contract to a developer, and they're planning to use it as a mixed usage, so that would be some housing and some retail. And it's the last chunk of property on the river, apparently. So that's kind of why it's a big deal, because this is a huge opportunity.
Right.
Go ahead and go first.
So, the gentleman whose idea this was, and I won't name any names, called me several months ago, and we met for coffee, and he explained to me his thought process with regards to this piece of 7-acre real estate. And it was going to be known as a Peace Park. And within the confines of that 7 acres would be a structure of a person's hand that would be holding a pearl. And his vision was that pearl on a bright sunshiny day could be seen from 3,000 feet in the air. Thus, a tourist attraction. And I'm not so sure he wasn't totally wrong with that. And in any case, he's called people together and explained to them, and even invited the gentleman that created this thing called a Peace Park throughout the world, Louis D'Amour, and had Mr. D'Amour explain the concept of a Peace Park and what it would do to local economy in terms of tourism. I don't necessarily agree with, it remains to be seen, how the Peace Park would involve tourism, but to extend that even farther, the whole South End community would be known as Peace Village. And the real estate the price of real estate would go up in all of the Peace Village.
Sure.
So there's merit to what these people and this gentleman are saying. They just need to convince the city council to move forward with their plan.
Is it too late?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that part of town, the Peace Park? Anything you can add?
So the idea of having a peace park is great, but the idea of making houses that are not affordable is not. Now, I'll be frank with you. I don't know every specific detail, so if I get something wrong, I apologize. But as far as I know, I've heard a couple things. First thing is that the houses are not going to be necessarily affordable. The people who live there now, not saying every single person there is in poverty, but they're not the richest folk, and to increase their, suggest maybe even increasing their taxes, that's not a right thing to do. I don't believe there was any discussion of maybe implementing something that can reflect us wanting to have cleaner energy or for Muscatine to go green. And I don't believe that when they thought about having these tourists and having these new people, that they thought, were they going to go get groceries? Because there happens to be what some people call a food desert. And what that is, well, there's not a grocery store nearby to go. They have to go all the way out of their way to Walmart and things like that to get what they need, because while there is a Dollar General, it doesn't have everything a family needs to sustain themselves. So it's a good idea overall. Again, and I'd love to look more at the specifics, and if this is covered, wonderful. But as far as I know now, these things are not necessarily, and it's something we need to go over together.
So, go ahead.
The proposed Peace Village, all those homes in the south end, both there and on the other side of the railroad tracks, were constructed about the time that Roach and Musser was in operation on Grandview Avenue, and you certainly don't remember that because of your age. And then GPC on the other side of the tracks. All those homes were built around those two industries for home dwelling. I don't necessarily agree or disagree with you regarding affordable housing or unaffordable housing.
Right. And here's the thing. I think definitely there should be some houses in Muscatine that are, a bit nicer, and people might want to move in on them. That's great. But I just don't know if having it there is the best place to do it. That's all really.
Sure.
Let's start with the positive. And then we're also going to say what areas of improvement for the city government. The city of government isn't responsible for everything. They really are. I mean, they might get lumped into some things, but they can't actually vote to make a grocery store down at South End. They can assert positive energy and make things happen based on their situation. But the city of Muscatine is doing a great job. And in a lot of ways, there's always room for improvement. But what are they doing really well right now that you kind of notice that isn't something you're going to get in there and change? What are some things that stick out that are going smoothly, and or that you want to be more in maintenance mode, if you will, or continue to advocate for what the city government's doing now? So what's the city government doing really well that you noticed?
So one of the things that they're starting to do well, and it's something I touched on, is the idea of transparency. If you look at our mayor right now, she has coffee with the mayor. And things like that, and reaching out to the people in the community is a beginning. It's a starting point. You're trying to do that. And I think if they continue to do that, and if I can help in any way, that's wonderful. That's what we need to keep doing.
Okay, yeah. You got any thought on something that stands out that is a positive?
Sure. The near completion of phase 1 of the corridor project. Years ago, that would not have been a point at all. But there again, going back to 2012, when the meeting with the Iowa DOT took place between Randy Hill and Steve Boca, that's what started that thing. There is more funding that the city hasn't used, and that will be implemented for phase 2. The Carver Corner down to the Dick Drake Way.
Yeah, it's going to be
Grandview
amazing.
Avenue and so forth. I used to refer to that back in my days in radio as the South Corridor.
Okay.
Made it sound a little bit better than Highway 61 South or whatever. The South Corridor, that has a little bit of a ring to it. What else is the city doing? Well, coming up is the renovation of the riverfront. And now we have this almost Friday event that's being scheduled for next year, and it's completed for this year. What a phenomenal event that was. Daniel, did you make it down to any of those Thursday night celebrations? I've never seen so many people in one place, other in Muscatine anyway, in my life. Just a phenomenal event.
Well, if you combine family with entertainment and some adult beverages and starve the community by no longer having Great River Days, you've got the recipe for a fabulous turnout.
That's right.
And Great River Days, I miss it, but I believe what happened was a group stepped up, like they always do when Great River Day, you know, it used to be the Muskie Boosters, then a couple other gentlemen, but I think that void was filled in a different way. Instead of having it be one event, it's spread out over 4.
But going off, it's a great thing that we're doing, and I'm glad it's being done. But on the other hand, back to the idea of representation. There's hundreds of people who live here, but they don't feel at home here. So implementing things like a Latino festival, even a German heritage festival, doesn't matter, so people can feel more comfortable to go to these things. My grandmother wanted to celebrate the 16th of September, and that's Mexican Independence Day. She asked me, hey, can we go to Davenport or to the Quad Cities? Because that's where they have events there. We don't have anything here in Muscatine. Anymore.
We used to.
But the point is, we don't have them now.
Yeah, okay. So it's something you're looking to
Sure.
Try to
add or reintroduce. Yep. Some of that's just the critical mass of how many people that we have at any given time, but the people from Davenport would be more than welcome to come to an event down here as well, because, you know, kind of reverse the flow. Well, that's a good point.
Takes one person and one idea.
Yep. Okay, so what's something, and this is kind of more like your first year in office, you know, sort of question, but it's also like, what's the city not doing that you think might be a room for improvement? And so this is when you can address, like, and you kind of did with your opening statement, but what's something that in your first, if you were elected your first 6 months or so, that you'd be really trying to push forward, you know, that might address something that you think's lacking now?
So a couple things, and it might be a little broad, but the first thing is the idea of positivity, and this is going to take some time. So changing people's sentiment, especially young people's, from man, I live in Muscatine to man, I live in Muscatine. And the other thing that was called to my attention is the need for more people at the fire department, for more supplies, for more things like that. And it's taken a toll on them. And it's not easy to be up, 23 hours a day waiting to go. And it's important that you have that help and you have those resources in your community. And that's something I think that I'll be there, help them as much as I can to help them get what they need. As well as any other, the police department if they happen to need something as well, because they are public safety. They're the ones who eventually help us. And if they're not prepared and if they're not ready, how are they going to be able to do a good job?
Okay. What are your thoughts on?
Let me capitalize on that just a little bit. 2 weeks ago, this morning at 1 a.m., my 91-year-old mother got up to use the restroom and fell down 12 steps. She has a broken arm in 2 places, a broken clavicle, 3 broken ribs, 2 broken vertebrae in her back, and her scalp was partially peeled back. There were 2 EMTs. My dad called 911. There were 2 EMTs that showed up and got my mother out of the basement, into the ambulance, and to the hospital where she was air cared to University of Iowa hospitals and clinics. But the point is I knew back when I was a mayor that we had a good firehouse. I mean, all our firemen are cross-trained, and they're just good at what they do. But I didn't realize how good they were until this event took place. And my mom's doing fine now. She's just on the mend. But I spoke to some firemen last night, and I shared with them the story, and they asked me if I would continue to tell that story, because the problem that the firefighters have is new people will come into the fold and they'll work for 9 months, a year, maybe 2 years, and maybe they're from Burlington or Iowa City or the Quad Cities, and those markets pay more money than our market does. So these guys work a little bit and then they're gone. I shouldn't say guys, it's gals too. But that's one of the problems that we have here with our fire department here in Muscatine. And I would imagine that the police department follows suit as well.
Right, and honestly, I agree with that. I'm not trying to say they're doing a bad job. I think they're doing a great job. I think it's important to make sure they're not worn out. And I think it's important to make sure that when we get people, they don't just leave after a while.
Right.
We have to make sure that we have something in place that makes them want to stay here in Muscatine.
Sure, sure. Well, one of the things that holds us back, and I don't know if there's a timetable, and if so, what is that timetable? But the lawsuit that took place between our mayor and our city administrator, as you alluded to, Daniel, that's known all the way across the state and across state lines as well. So we have a very, very bad reputation here in Muscatine for city administration, if you will. And I don't know what it's going to take to heal that. I don't think the current mayor can heal it. I know that the current city administrator can't heal it. And those two people are just doing their jobs. I think they're doing a good job, but they're just doing their jobs. And they don't worry about the past, but it's the city, it's the citizens of this community that have to worry about what took place.
Who is running against the current mayor?
No one.
And do you have any thoughts on why that might be?
No.
So that's not a.
I don't.
It's not a fun. Like Roger Roth isn't even in it this year.
I don't have any.
It's not quite a fun. It's not quite as fun for. I don't know. It's just nice in a democracy to have
Can
somebody.
we go back? Can we do Main Street again?
There's going to be a reason why you don't win, or why you do win. Do you have any thoughts as to why people should elect you? You've got strengths and weaknesses. You know, if you can address something that you might think somebody might have a concern about, this is your chance, because we're going to wrap things up with giving you some closing thoughts here.
Okay. All right. So I don't mean to sound too cliche here, but if you look back, there was a young guy who was running for senator, and they said he was too young, and that guy was John F. Kennedy. Now, I'm not any Kennedy by any means, but I'm just saying, young people going and running for political office has happened before, and great things has come out of it. What we need on our council is, like I said before, a representation of our whole community. We need diversity. And to the people out there, I just want to say, solo te pido una cosa. No te estoy prometiendo que cuando gano o si gano todo va a ser perfecto, pero voy a tratar. Y en fin, tratando a veces es la mejor cosa que puedes hacer. So, I'll try.
Cool. Yeah. Could you address the audience, the constituents, with your thoughts on
Sure.
on your election?
I don't want to be known as the council member who sits up here and looks down on my constituents. I want to be known as the person down here that looks up at the constituents, and I want to be able to do what they want me to do. It's that simple. It's an honor for me to serve. It was an honor for me to serve as mayor for 2 terms. I'm happy I was able to do that. But now I want to vote. I want to have a say-so in the future of our community.
Well, what I'd like to say for sure, to take the 3-shot, I love that angle, by the way, but thank you both for running, because no matter, that sometimes it could be a thankless situation, as far as the people that might have some negative things to say or some positive. And you guys aren't doing this for the money, obviously. It's I just appreciate people that take that next step to have an opinion or a value, and then advocate to spend time and their own resources to. So thank you for running, and if you win, thank you in advance for your diligence. But everybody that's running, there's quite a list of people who are running. It looks like it's going to be a whole fresh crop at the council. And so I would like to invite everybody to be on the show if they would like. You do not have to, but by all means, if you are running for office in the city of Muscatine, you are formally invited by that guy, Chad T. Bishop, to be on the show. You've seen kind of the lowdown. We're going to offer candidates a chance to address the community and to learn more about each other. So again, thanks to Daniel and Dewayne for being on the show. And we look forward to bringing you a couple more broadcasts. Specifically, the school board is October 23rd. October 16th, I hope to have the 5th Ward candidates come on. That would be great if we get a chance to learn a little bit about everybody. But thanks again for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Muscatine Viewpoint, and we'll see you next time.